Now every year I like to engage in a little experimental gardening to try something new, see how it will go in our climate here in Tasmania. Last year I tried some watermelons, some cool climate watermelons, and they grew, they did have a crop, but realistically watermelons wasn't a great contribution to our food supply. It was a little bit of fun, it was enjoyable to have them, but the season that they come here is quite late, so they're not as welcome as if they came earlier, as the northern watermelons do in the middle of summer when it's hot and you really want to eat them. So I thought I'd try something different this year, something that would actually contribute more substantially to the food supply over a longer term, and something that we could keep. And the area I'm going to try it in is this section here that I've developed in autumn, where the hens have been in here over winter. I had some oats in that I had planted, and the hens have wiped that out. As you can see, there's nothing left. What's coming through now is some bracken, because there's a lot of bracken roots in here, because it is basically just straight from forest. You may remember that there was a pile of rubbish here that I had where I'd burnt a stump out, and the hens have moved that all away from where I'm standing. So what I'm going to do first is to come in and break this ground up with the tiller, basically because the hens leave a little bit of a hard surface and it would be difficult for weed control if I didn't break that, and also for the planting process. So I don't need to cultivate it deep because it was cultivated before and doesn't really need a deep cultivation. Just a minor surface loosening is all that's needed. So what am I going to plant? Well, what I was going to have a go at growing is these things. What are they? Well, we call them chickpeas. In many parts of the world they have other names. I think garbanzos, hummers, depending where you live. But in Australia we call them chickpeas. Now, will they grow in Tasmania? The answer is an obvious yes, as these were actually labelled product of Tasmania. But they're not generally grown in Australia by home gardeners. Generally they are a commercial crop, so I thought I'd give them a go. We as vegetarians use them a fair bit and use them in a variety of ways, both in making hummus, as a flour. So having something like that, which is of course being a dry legume, will keep, is going to be a really good extra to our diet, and an extra in terms of what we can produce from the garden if it's successful. I have never grown these before, have no experience with them at all, so this is a total learning curve for me. But I'm going to have a go, and I don't see why I can't produce something. Now, when I was buying these, a chap said to me, what are you going to do with them? Are you going to plant them, or are you going to grind them up into flour? And I said, I'm going to plant them. He said, have you ever tried peanuts? And I said no. So, oh, why not? Let's have a go at some peanuts too. So I bought some raw peanuts, and I will choose out of these the ones that have the skin most intact, the best quality ones, and we'll plant some of those, not a huge amount of the peanuts, because they are very experimental in this climate. But they would certainly be an interesting thing for the children to see growing, because the growing habit of peanuts is quite unusual. So I'm going to use the wheel hoe to run some rows, and I will put a little bit of blood and bone in just to give them a bit of a start. When sprinkling blood and bone into furrows like this, it's useful to go over it again with the wheel hoe just to spread it around a bit more evenly, because you're often quite uneven. Now, in planting these, I'm not being very precise. I'm simply letting them lay where they fall, and look, I don't know if this spacing is ideal or not. It's going to be quite varied anyway. So they're all in, and I've still got enough left over for a feed, so that's good. Now I'm going to cover them back with the wheel hoe, and covering them reasonably deep because this is going to be fairly dry in this area, So being deeper, the roots will have more moisture available. Speaking of water, I'm not going to actually water these now. I'm going to wait for natural rainfall. I'm expecting some within a few days. There is some moisture in the soil. Look, Tasmania, we have wet winters, and I'm really surprised now in mid-October how quickly it's drying out. I actually expected this soil to be wetter than it is, but I guess being on this slope it drains fairly well. But as we move into summer, of course our rainfall drops back even more. So I expect that I probably will need to irrigate this to some degree over summer to actually keep it growing well and to give a good crop. You will notice I've run the furrows along the contour to actually maximise collection of any rain that does fall. So that's the chickpeas in. Now for the peanuts. Now peanuts is something that I have grown before, but not in Tasmania. Long ago I have grown it in New South Wales where it was much warmer. So this is a real experiment, and look, it is pushing the boundaries. Parts of Tasmania here on the northwest coast, we do have red soils, or soils that are perhaps similar to Queensland where they do grow lots of peanuts, but of course climatic conditions are quite different. This soil is very different again. How it will go, I really have no idea. I'm going to of course plant the ones that are well coated. These are of course raw peanuts, don't try planting roasted ones. They're a very interesting plant to grow, so if you're in a area that it's likely that you might get something, have a go. But nothing ventured, nothing gained, as they say, and you can only try. It's the only way you'll learn something. So I'm giving these reasonable space because, and I might put 2 in each spot just and then thin it out, because they do actually turn into quite a large plant. And there are different varieties of course, and I've really no idea what I've got here. So with those in the ground, that's my experimental gardening in place for this year. Time will tell how it goes, and we'll revisit it in the monthly updates from a year in our garden. If you are trying some experimental gardening this year, why not mention it in the comments below, and we can all find out about some new things to try.